Came across this clip on BoobTube. Title: Dr. Fauci just gave Trump's hitman the worst day of his career. Trumper Congressman Jim Jordan just got into a fiery exchange with Dr. Fauci, but it didn't go quite as he had expected. What a disaster for Jordan. Well done, Dr. Fauci. Let's have a listen. Plays for just under 10 minutes.
Select subcommittee on the coronavirus pandemic, several GOP members condemned Dr. Anthony Fauci's actions while guiding America's pandemic response. Congressman and former wrestling coach Jim Jordan tried to apply his noted finishing hold, the obfuscator, on Dr. Anthony Fauci. The heated exchange really seemed designed to overwhelm Dr. Fauci with a barrage of unanswerable questions and confusing accusations. And the video you're about to see from that committee hearing investigating the handling of the coronavirus pandemic was not the first time Congressman Jordan has mixed it up with Dr. Fauci. It was oddly reminiscent of a previous battle of wits that occurred back in 2020. In both cases, you'll see that the congressman's bombastic, incessant, unanswerable questions and accusations just bemused the unflappable Dr. Fauci. And their first encounter went something like this.
The chair now recognizes for 5 minutes Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Fauci, do protests increase the spread of the virus?
Do protests increase the spread of the virus?
The government limit the protesting?
I don't think that's relevant to...
Well, you make all kinds of recommendations. You
No.
make comments on dating, on baseball, on everything
No.
you can imagine. I'm just asking you, just said that protests increase the spread.
No.
I'm just asking you, should we try to limit the protests?
No, I think I would leave that to people who have more of a position to do that. I can tell you...
Government stopping people from going to church, Dr. Fauci, but no limit to protests, but boy, you can't go to church on Sunday.
What was the...
I don't know how many times I can answer that.
Round one, Fauci. Now back to Congress today. Congressman Jordan once again tactically employed an accusatory tone and nearly indiscernible questions to suggest the vaguest of points. And I might add also that Jordan employed really one of the most well-worn and old-school TV and movie tropes of constantly removing his glasses for the sake of emphasis. In this case, Congressman Jordan only emphasized his own sophomoric skills in an attempt to discredit a man who directly saved the lives of countless Americans during the most difficult healthcare crisis in 100 years. Well, the opportunity Congressman Jordan seized was not to get to the truth or a truth, but to grandstand, call it...
This guy's nuts. Dr. Fauci saved lives. He destroyed millions of lives. I mean, come on. Let's go back.
Grabbing at the straws of public opinion to try to create new news, maybe news that doesn't have to do with the far right's political deity and chosen cult leader, Donald Trump. But, as you'll see, he would not do it at the expense of the unflappable Dr. Fauci. The disquieting but somewhat entertaining rematch went down something like this.
Time's expired. Now recognize Mr. Jordan from Ohio for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Doctor, why was it so important that the virus not have started in a lab?
We don't know where it started, and that's the reason why I keep an open mind. So I don't know what you mean by why was it so important. It wasn't important.
You still don't know where it started? The guys you gave money to figured out in 3 days.
No.
Mr. Anderson said on January 31st, 2020, virus looks engineered, virus not consistent with evolutionary theory. The very next day, Dr. Gary said, I don't know how this happens in nature. It'd be easy to do in a lab. And then 3 days later, Shazam, they switch and say it has to be nature. So they figured out in 3 days, but you still don't know?
No, in fact, if you look at what they were saying, Congressman Jordan, they were saying that it was not a manufactured virus. It still could have evolved out of a lab.
Well, let me read something here to you.
They're not incompatible.
In our study on the censorship of the Biden administration working with big tech, I want to read you a WhatsApp message from Mark Zuckerberg. Can we include that the White House put pressure on us to censor the lab leak theory? So this is a communication on July 16th, 2021. Nick Clegg, Joel Kaplan, Sheryl Sandberg, Mark Zuckerberg. They're certainly feeling the pressure to downplay any lab leak theory and go with the natural origin theory.
Is there a question there?
There's coming. One's coming. Here's another email to Mark Zuckerberg. It says, subject line, COVID misinformation, Wuhan lab leak theory. In response to continued public pressure and tense conversations with the new administration, we started removing 5 COVID claims, including the lab leak theory. Mr. Zuckerberg responds, this seems like a good reminder that when we compromise our standards due to pressure from an administration in either direction, we often later regret it. Why was it so important the virus not have started in a lab?
Wasn't so important that the virus not. We don't know. We know
it was important.
You know, they've never isolated the virus because it doesn't exist. And the question that has to be asked is, how do you make a vaccine for a virus that doesn't exist? I tell you, these congressmen and these senators are just worthless, absolutely worthless. Let's go back.
Someone in the Biden administration, so much so that the top people at Meta, the top people at Facebook are asking, why are we getting all this pressure to downplay the lab leak theory? And we have an email from June of the same year, June 4th, 2021, saying the same thing. It was certainly important to somebody.
Well, what has that got to do with me?
I'm asking you because you're the expert on the coronavirus. I'm saying, why was the administration so pushing not to have the lab leak theory as something that was viable?
I can answer that. I've kept an open mind throughout the entire process.
You kept an open mind. Dr. Fauci, open mind.
That is correct.
What happened in those 3 days? Why did Dr. Anderson and, Mr. Anderson and Dr. Gary, why did they change their mind in 180 degrees? Because what Christian Anderson says 3 days later, after he said virus looks engineered, virus not consistent with evolutionary theory, 3 days later he says the main crackpot theories going around at the moment relate to this virus being somehow engineered, and that is demonstrably false. How did they figure all that out in 3 days, Dr. Fauci?
You can do that.
Still have an open mind.
Well, what they did is that they testified before this committee. What they did, they went back and looked at the sequences and realized that their initial concern was unfounded about that, and it did not look at all like it was manufactured. But as they said in their paper, even though they feel it was more likely...
3 days, they figured it out.
That's exactly. You could do that in 3 days. You can scan sequences in a day. You don't need 3 days.
Okay, who's Robert Redfield?
The former director of the CDC.
Dr. Redfield, right? And he was also on the coronavirus task force. Is that accurate?
He was a member of the coronavirus task force.
And here's what he said to this committee. He said, Redfield said that Fauci and Collins left him out because Redfield suspected that coronavirus had leaked from the Chinese lab. Is that accurate?
Well, he said that, but that's not true. That is incorrect, Congressman.
Dr. Redfield's lying to the committee when he sat right where you sat?
When he said that I kept him out, that is an incorrect statement. The roster who was on the phone
was Dr. Redfield in that conference call on February 1st when you had Mr. Anderson and Dr. Gary on that call?
He was not. And the conference call was put together by Jeremy Farrar. So no one kept him out. He said he was kept out because
Did U.S. tax dollars...
You want me to answer the question?
Yeah, I would just wonder why he wasn't on the call. It seems to me the head of CDC, part of the coronavirus task force, which was formed 2 days prior to that call, would have been on the call.
Well, the call was arranged by Jeremy Farrar. You should ask him.
Okay. Did U.S. tax dollars flow through a grant recipient to the lab in China?
I'm sorry.
Did U.S. tax dollars flow through a grant recipient to the lab in China?
Yes, of course. It was a sub-award to the Wuhan Institute.
And who approved that award?
Excuse me?
And who approved that award? What agency approved that award?
National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases.
Your agency approved that, right?
Yes, it did. Did
that have anything to do with this downplaying of the lab leak theory?
No.
Nothing to do with it?
Nothing.
What do you agree that there was a push to downplay the lab leak theory?
Not on my part.
Really?
Really?
Wow.
Wow.
I think most of the country would find that amazing. I still got 11 seconds.
But look at the facts. I've kept an open mind throughout the entire process.
All right, I yield back.
So I suppose it's only natural to expect that the good, the decent, and the socially responsible will become further grist for the MAGA mill moving forward. Maybe they hope that the stench it creates might just water enough eyes that many Americans won't indeed see the truth before them, and that they'll forget so many of them are here to opine because people like Dr. Fauci, and the first responders, and so many others performed above and beyond the call of duty and expectation. I don't know that I'd let Jim Jordan coach my son in wrestling, but I would and I did trust Dr. Fauci to advise successfully the imperfect but effective guidelines to prevent a global pandemic from decimating this country. Or maybe you think bleach was the way to go.
I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute.
Round 2, Fauci.
You know, Jim Jordan always does one of these, He headed up the Benghazi task force, and when he was questioning Hillary, he blew it. I made videos on that at that time. And Jim Jordan, he talks the talk, but nothing ever gets done on any of these committees. That's why they're all worthless. And obviously the guy that put this clip up, he's a Democrat. He's pro-Fauci. There was no virus. It was never isolated. It never existed. Period. I'll attach the link. Look at it. Let me know what you think. You sure as hell know what I think, don't you?